Jim Harbaugh goes out and interviews with the Los Angeles Chargers. What does that mean? How is Michigan feeling? We are going to discuss a bit about that. Players coming, players going, a decommitment, all kinds of stuff when it comes to roster construction. Granted, one of them's 2025, doesn't matter that much. We're going to get into all of that on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Monday. We're back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. I was on the ground, or more so in the press box area at Crisler Center on Saturday when Jim Harbaugh got the loudest ovation I can imagine he's ever received in his life. It was deafening, all of the times in which people gave him standing ovations and just absolutely cheered their hearts out at the championship celebration at Crisler Center. How much does that mean? Because, right, he wants to feel loved. Now, the fan base certainly making him feel loved. The question has been how the rest of the brass is treating Jim Harbaugh. Now, I have talked briefly to one of my sources as far as that's concerned, and they're kind of in the middle, right? Like they sounded kind of sad, but they also sounded hopeful, right? That's the most I'm going to get into it with that, but I haven't learned that much about it in terms of where Jim Harbaugh stands. Now, there are two reports that are out there. We talked about those last week. You had John U. Bacon. You had Michael Rosenberg, who indicated that Harbaugh would prefer to stay in Ann Arbor. Now, there are certain things that have to be worked out if that's the case. There's reports about the idea of Michigan essentially not having any harsh penalties or getting rid of him if the NCAA, for whatever reason, comes down hard on him. Now, that's not a implicit admission of guilt. You don't know what the NCAA is going to do, right? Just like you don't know what the Big Ten was going to do. Just because we've covered all of the evidence and such that they believe they have and think they have in all of these cases and what have you. And to Burgergate, by the way, someone who was kind of connected with that told me something. And I'm not going to say it. That's not something I should share. I know people are going to get mad at me because you just say it. No, there are certain things that I can't share. I just thought better of it. But nonetheless, I just don't. The more and more, it just kind of seems like they don't have the goods, right? The NCAA, because there are no goods to be had, right? That's just how it goes sometimes. And with that said, the NCAA could still come down hard on him. And I know people say, just do whatever Jim wants. That's fine. But if the NCAA said let's say Michigan's like 10-year contract, fully guaranteed, whatever the NCAA does, here's 120, 150 million, whatever. And then NCAA comes out and says, you know what, we're going to give you an 8-year show cause. Then Michigan's just screwed. So I understand them wanting to have some kind of safeguards in place. They need to come to a happy medium if they're going to be able to retain Jim Harbaugh. I understand there's probably a lot of people out there right now who are fretting a lot of the departures, and we'll get into the departures here momentarily. But what does make it kind of difficult in some ways is this kind of feels like a situation where Michigan is not going to capitalize on the national championship. Now, bragging rights forever, right? And certainly people have been bragging for 26 years over the 1997 team. You can start that clock anew now. Certainly in 2050, Michigan fans will still be, if Jesus hasn't come back yet, will be sitting there saying, man, that national championship, how great was that? Hopefully there's more beyond that, but it just does not feel like, if Harbaugh departs and all of these things, that they're necessarily capitalizing on this in the way that they could. Now, obviously, like I said, there's a lot of departures. We'll talk about the departures in segment 2, but it just feels like, I understand Harbaugh did what he was supposed to do, what he tried to do. But you want to see, like, in a way, it's almost like, man, I just want to see a couple more years. Like, even if there's no national championship, even if there's no more wins against Ohio State, even if there's no more wins, well, there'd have to be at least wins over Ohio State and over Michigan State. But just, okay, you've got it to this point. Is it fully stabilized, right? Because there is the danger of becoming LSU, right? You saw that. LSU, incredible. Next year, not good. Next year, pratfall. And they're still trying to find their footing. They don't have a defense. Granted, they didn't have a defense even in the championship year compared to what a lot of other teams have. But that is the problem, right? Now, Jim Harbaugh has earned the right to do whatever he wants at this point. And certainly if he leaves, you're looking at head coach Sharon Moore. You probably see a departure of Jesse Minter. And certainly there will be other coaches that would go with Jim. But you still want to see things kind of stabilized. You don't want to see it right after a national championship, a complete destabilization of the program. And that is what concerns me more than anything is that. But will he come? Or sorry, will he stay? Will he go? No one knows, right? That's the thing. We've been through this 8 of the 9 years. That's just the world we live in. Even if they give him a new contract this year, you know that the same thing is going to happen again next year unless Michigan falls on its face next year. To me, it's kind of hard picturing there not being a Jim Harbaugh coach team. Like, just there's a part of me that feels a very strong piece of just kind of like, well, of course he's going to come back. It's going to be more like last year. He interviewed with the Denver Broncos. Reportedly had gotten an offer. I don't know that was like a wide report or anything, but I was told he was given the offer and that he turned it down, right? He was just more kind of navigating to get, more money from the athletic department for the assistants and NIL and all that kind of stuff. Show he meant business, as Joel Klatt had said often was probably the case. So this year, I do think there's more earnest interest, but he does have to get the offer. It has to be one he wants and one that he wants to negotiate. So there's all of that, but we'll see. But at this point, no one really knows anything, right? Like there's certainly people that are like, oh, your head coach is gone. When talking about Michigan, there's others that will sit there and say, just wait a minute. I would say, wait a minute, right? Because since he's been at Michigan, he has yet to depart. I didn't feel like anything he said at the Crisler Center event, I didn't feel like any of that was like a goodbye. In the same way that I felt like J.J. McCarthy was 100% a goodbye, and that was confirmed to me about 5 minutes after the whole program was done. So we'll see. No one necessarily knows anything. But let's talk about what we do know as far as the team that you're going to see next year. Lots of guys who have departed, but there are some key players coming back. Before we move on, the NFL regular season has wrapped up. The playoffs are going. So there's time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's win or lose, by the way. $150 in bonus bets. Doesn't matter what you do with that $5 bet. You throw it on, let's just say the Los Angeles Rams against the Detroit Lions. You lost, but you got $150 to play around with after that. Maybe you'll wise up and choose the Lions next time. The app is super easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet, like same game parlays that's live. Find bets in the new Explore tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, and that's the best way to find popular parlays and a heck of a lot more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Monday was mostly a good news day for Michigan. It's kind of bittersweet, right? Because you had a couple players who said their goodbyes. You had a couple saying they're coming back. You had Michigan beating Ohio State in basketball, just like football. And what just felt like a completely disjointed offense that was bailed out by shockingly good 3-point shooting. The Fab Five reunites at Crisler for the first time since they played. That was cool. I went down there for a minute and said some things to my guys that I know from that team, which is still surreal to me, by the way. Chris Webber is the only person I've ever met who I used to pretend to be as a child. I think I pretended to be like Lou Whitaker, Alan Trammell, Travis Fryman, Cecil Fielder. But I always pretended to be when playing basketball, Chris Webber. That's who I wanted to be. Not Isaiah Thomas. I didn't like the way he spelled his name. But surreal day at Chrysler, and there at Chrysler I saw a Mr. Donovan Edwards. Yeah, and you can see the picture I took of him and Chris Webber hugging. But I saw Mr. Donovan Edwards, who had just about an hour and a half beforehand, announced he is returning to Michigan. So as far as offense, there you have it. There's Michigan's sole returning offensive player at this juncture. Out of everyone who could go pro, Donovan's back. But I think that's good news, especially if he does end up being, now obviously Kalel Mullings hasn't really announced what he's going to do. That I wouldn't be surprised if that maybe he has. Maybe I did get a couple of things that nope, not yet. So it could be the Donovan Edwards Kalel Mullings show, certainly. And I know there's some people out there that think Kalel might be RB1 at that point. I would implore give Donovan that try, right? Because Donovan is best when he is a volume carrier. And the problem is you've got to spell him, right? Because this is the way I look at it. And this is kind of like the Ohio State 2022. And I said this before he even started breaking out. The way Donovan operates is in terms of carries, it's 2 yards, 2 yards, 3 yards, 2 yards, 2 yards, 4 yards, 2 yards, 8 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards, 12 yards, 15 yards, 5 yards, 28 yards, 50 yards. Like, that's just how he operates, right? Wasn't in the national championship game, of course. He obviously found a way to get to 40, right to 40 twice right away. Wasn't that in the college football playoff last year where he got the big run and then just kind of got bottled up after that. But generally, he's a volume carrier, so you hope that he would that will be played into and that they can use him. It's considering they just don't have as many weapons as it feels like they had. Next year that they look to use him in the receiving game a ton. Like, just get creative with it. Do a ton of stuff. I mean, you could put Kalel or Cole Cabana, Benjamin Hall, Jordan Marshall, any of those guys back there, and then just put Donovan all over the field. Bring him on jet sweeps. Do everything that you can to just get him utilized. I think would be the wise choice, to be honest. But otherwise, a lot of defensive people have decided to return, and including basically most of the secondary, because Josh Wallace out of eligibility is gone. We knew that. And Mikey Sainris still out of eligibility is also gone. We knew that. So, but you have Will Johnson, who again we knew was going to have to return as a incoming junior. But Rod Moore and Makari Page both back. I mean, that is incredible news for the Michigan defense. And Josiah Stewart also back. So now you have 4 guys who are, you can look at what the starting edges are and say, well, Josiah Stewart wasn't a starter, but he was a giant contributor. Giant contributor. Let's actually go ahead and take a look at what his what his snap count was over the course of the year, because I mean it's going to rival anybody else. So I mean the first quarter wasn't that much, 18, 15, 20, 16, and then you start getting 20, 19, 24, 20, 30, 27, 27, 32, 18, 27, 36. He had 352 snaps over the course of the season. I mean, he's a guy who can help really, like, you can really start putting him out there. You couple him with Derek Moore, who had probably a little bit more in terms of that. I really wish I could be head on with a computer, but it just doesn't work that way here, unless I have my iPad here, but I'm not doing that. Derek Moore had about 90 more snaps with 443, but you have just the entire front set. You feel good about the linebackers, Jay-Sean Barham, Ernest Hausman. Then you've got Makari Page, Rod Moore, Will Johnson, and then after that, you have to figure some things out. Is it Keon Sabb as the nickel? Is it Jaden McBurrows as the nickel? I mean, you're going to want to get Keon Sabb on the field as much as possible. Certainly, it could just be part of a rotation. And then who's that next corner? You're back to kind of square one from last year. But that's still a very impressive defense that you could feel could still be the number 1 defense in the country, to be honest. So it will be interesting to see how it's how that's going to go, right? But because you know that the defense is probably in a really, really good position given that. Offensively, you lose everything. Now, let's talk about JJ for a moment. Because obviously I've been saying for a long time, JJ struck me as a guy who was going to come back. So I talked to someone at the Champion Circle thing, and they had said, be prepared to write your JJ goodbye piece, essentially. And I was like, I'm kind of surprised. And he said, well, here's the thing. JJ knows he's going to wow NFL people. He knows he's going to wow the scouts and all of the teams and meetings. Feels like he can maybe even, do a better job with that than some like Caleb Williams and such by being able to diagnose defenses and just kind of talk about the game, the types of things that you want to hear from a quarterback. But more than anything, it was, I know that this is the top that I can reach at the college level in terms of delivering, right? Like next year, it would be either repeat or take a step back. So it's a good time to say goodbye, because I am leaving having beaten Ohio State 3 times, having won the Big Ten 3 times, having won a national championship. It's just the perfect time to depart. So that is what I was told was his reasoning for moving on. Like it or not like it, it's just that's the reality we live in. And I know a lot of people just generally, unless someone's out of eligibility, don't want to hear it. I implore you to not have a negative reaction online. Keep that to yourself instead of, because trust me, these guys see it, and it doesn't do any good for anybody for you to be emotional about it in that sort of way on the internet. Not that I've seen a ton this time, but I just recall a lot of uproar over the Rashawn Gary decision when that happened. And I know he also sat out the bowl game, but that got back to the family pretty quickly, and I heard about it pretty quickly as well. So yeah, just be mature about it. Let them make their own decisions. It is their lives. It's not yours. But obviously, happy trails to just a ton of people. Blake Corum, AJ Barner, 6 offensive linemen. I mean, Ladarius Henderson, Trente Jones, Carson Barnhart, Trevor Keegan, Zach Zinter, Drake Nugent, Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson. It's just a lot on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, defensively, happy trails to Chris Jenkins and Mike Barrett. And Mike Barrett. He and Mikey Sainristil are certainly going to live forever in Michigan historicity. And Junior Colson as well. Josh Wallace. I mean, that's a lot. Michigan certainly could break that draft record. We'll see how that goes in April. But this might be the one year I go to Indianapolis for the combine. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, let's move on to other things. We've got a couple other things that I just going to hit on. I know it's not going to be like one thing, so we'll just kind of make it a potpourri as it usually is. So we'll do that here in a moment. But before we do, I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we just talk for a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. It's scary. So I can imagine a more helpless feeling than if Sarah and the boys, if they were sick and there's a supply chain issue, all these types of things happening, they could not get the help that they need that keeps them from the life-saving medication that they absolutely would need to have. So thankfully, everyone's going to be okay because of Jase Medical. I did get them the Jase case. Now, what's the Jase case? It's a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. So visit jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician. Your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost, and it comes so fast. I believe I got it next day. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. So go to jasemedical.com and use the offer code LOCKDOWN to get $20 off of your order. I kind of accidentally went over some of the things I intended to go over in segment 3 and segment 2. It happens to the best of us. So that's kind of why the truncated thing, and why we'll talk about a bunch of different things, because I just kind of stopped following my notes and just started winging it from the hip. It happens. I do want to mention again, the Fab Five thing is pretty great. Just getting to see all 5 of them together. at one time in one place. It's kind of weird because, I mean, this is the first time that that's been the case since, like, what, 1993? Absolutely wild. Absolutely wild. Like, I've seen all of them at different times, right? Like, Jalen comes to games here and there. Jalen was at the championship game. I see Jimmy King all the time. He splits time between here and Dallas, Texas. I see him all the time. So, like, I caught up with him for a minute. I've seen Chris Webber at multiple different football things. I've never seen him at anything basketball. So that was just huge for that, right? And that was just a cool moment. And on top of it, it's when Michigan beats Ohio State again, and you continue to have things to make Ohio State people feel bad, which, you know, considering the way that they treated you. And then I think this is a really nice moment for everyone to just kind of come together and you know, rub it in their faces a little bit. So that's the fun of it all as far as that's concerned. But it was just, that's a cool moment. That's something I've, you know, kind of waited for forever. But the only thing that sucks is it was met with pretty much no fanfare, right? This wasn't planned, apparently, in terms of, like, this wasn't like a, hey, we're going to do this and everyone should know about it. It was just kind of like you're sitting there and it's like, oh, by the way, the Fab Five's here. Okay. So, yeah, that's part of it. Happy trails to Chris Ewald, Michigan's first 2025 commit, who has decided to, after visiting Georgia this weekend, move on. This is part of my destabilization thing, right? You know, now Hollywood, Chaminade, Madonna, out of Florida, Fort Lauderdale area. I mean, that's where Jeremiah Smith was, right? Like, that's a really high-end school with a lot of talent, and you want to be able to keep a guy like that. But he was Michigan's first commit back on December 16th, 2022 from the 2025 cycle. Michigan's now down to 3. And I know it's hard to keep guys like that in your class, but the fact that there is no capitalization on the national championship, and it's the other way, it's a regression, that's not great, okay? And I understand the landscape is completely changed, and that sucks, because if this was 2016, you would probably be seeing a completely different trajectory, right? Because there wouldn't be NIL, there was still the bag man and all of that, but still, you know, Michigan would be able to come off a national championship, and you just have a bunch of guys being like, I want to line up and play for that team because look at what they just did. Look at the development. Look at what they're able to do. You hope that the transfer portal ends up rounding that out, right? I know a lot of people have the pipe dream, which I am one of them, that Taulia Tagovailoa will end up having his waiver granted by the NCAA and that he can end up at Michigan. That would be a great scenario for Michigan. And I know people that say, but look, he makes a couple boneheaded mistakes every time, every game. Well, it would be, I think, different when you're surrounded by a little bit, you have a defense and you have a team, right? You don't have to be Superman. You've got a run game, all that kind of stuff. I don't know that he would come to Michigan or not, but certainly he's got a teammate already former teammate in Ann Arbor, and Jase Barham. That's not any inside info. That's just me wish casting personally. But, I do think that Michigan probably should target they got a transfer portal quarterback last year, Jack Tuttle. I think that at worst, you need to get someone out there that can help solidify the position. Because right now you're rolling with, I know everyone's excited about Alex Orji and all. And we've seen him make some throws in like the spring game last year. He had that throw to Samaj that was super impressive. I haven't really seen it in a game, however. Jaden Denegal's been getting a ton of pub. And obviously you got Jaden Davis that's going to eventually rise up and be that guy. But I would like a little more assurances because you don't have to sacrifice 2024. You don't have to because you've got a defense already. Even if Jesse Minder isn't coming back, that's clearly pieces you can work with. So you've got running backs that could certainly do it. You've got Donovan. You probably have Kalel Mullings. And then you've got other guys that, are coming in or kind of stepping up as you move along and you look at that and say, that's good enough, right? You're not that far off except for at the quarterback position. Yes, running back is not quite as what it was with Blake Corum, but Donovan Edwards certainly is a possibility. If you utilize him right, you could not take a step back there, right? You just have to be smart about it. I would venture to guess Donovan will go higher in the NFL draft than Blake when everything is said and done, because he's got more to him, but this year just was not what he would have wanted, right? So I think that if you use him smartly, it could be a really, really good year still. And when you look at the schedule, Texas still doesn't really have a great defense. They come to Ann Arbor. They do have Quinn Ewers. They did lose Xavier Worthy. They did bring in Isaiah Bond. So it's still gonna be a challenge, but you've got a defense. Congratulations. And if you get past that, Washington has been decimated. Jedd Fisch is a really good coach, but at the same time, that's a game that Michigan very well could win. And really, I look at Oregon and Ohio State as being Oregon, Ohio State, and Texas are the three that I have circled. Otherwise, I feel like they could, not necessarily pencil in 9 or write in ink 9 wins, but you can pencil in 9 wins. And then outside of that, it's what do you do in those other 3 games? And I think that they've got a really good shot at winning 1 or 2 of those, maybe all 3. Who knows? But a lot of that fulcrum also requires Jim Harbaugh to, remain in large part too because of Jesse Minter. I would have said Jesse Minter was gone regardless. I'm not necessarily feeling that just in this moment, but it's 50-50-ish in my mind all around. I know some people would say it's 60-40 Harbaugh returning. There's a lot of pessimists out there that say he's just gone regardless. Just wait and see. We'll see. No one actually knows. Anyone who says they know is lying to you. Anyway, that's going to do it for this show. We'll finally do that mailbag I promised last week. We'll do that tomorrow. It'll be a little bit easier now. Not a lot of going, there's no parades and championship events to go to. I don't have church tomorrow. And we'll just be sitting here. So we'll be able to actually kind of get into things the way that we're supposed to. Hopefully not at 9 p.m. and all of that. So anyway, stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon. Peace.